Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. So, from what I can tell, this is the first time in your career in the video game industry that you've used crowdfunding to help fund a development of a video game. What is it like so far, and what are some of the kind of emotions now that's the first day of your Kickstarter campaign for Boogerman 20th Anniversary? What's kind of going through your mind right now?
I think the big difference in what I'm doing right now as opposed to what I've been doing the last 20 years or so is kind of handling a lot more of it, not just putting together the pitch, but also dealing with the business side of stuff, setting up the company, setting up the artists, just getting everything rolling. And it's been a pretty hectic last 30 days, but I have a feeling that it's probably going to be nothing compared to what the next 30-something days is going to be like. Today I couldn't sleep very well last night, knowing that we were going to be launching the campaign this morning, had some final changes and tweaks to do on it. And, I'm still my head's still a little bit spinning so far. It's only been about 6 hours and 25 minutes, but, I've probably gone through every emotion so far just today. I go from being optimistic to disappointed to stoked to, it's pretty exciting though, for sure.
So you and Mike have had a long career in the video game industry, since making Boogerman. But what's it like stepping away from, the jobs that you've held for quite a while now, and then kind of going on your own in a Kickstarter? That has to be a huge leap and a huge risk, personally for you guys.
Yeah, it's actually pretty horrifying, to be honest with you. I've had a really great time working at all the different studios I've been at, and Mike has as well. We've always talked about wanting to do something together again, and it's just one thing or another doesn't line up, whether it's a project we're working on or just financial reasons or whatever it might be. So we've stayed in touch, and we've made sure that if the timing ever seemed right, that it was something we would definitely take a chance at doing. And it just happened to be right. Right now with the retro stuff, having such a resurgence, and with a platform like Kickstarter, it's worth the risk for us. It's the other thing that's involved is it's the 20th anniversary next year. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for Mike, I wouldn't. I couldn't do this. I rely on him, to kind of be that shoulder for me to talk to and to work stuff out with. It's pretty scary, and it's pretty scary for him as well. But we kind of rely on each other just to try and talk sense into ourselves and make sure that we feel we're doing the right thing. And it's definitely a risk. But it's a risk we think is worth taking. It's a once in a lifetime shot for us to do something like this, especially with the 20th anniversary coming up. And it's just something that we felt like we wanted to try now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe it's been 20 years, and that really just shows how old we're all kind of getting.
Yeah.
Going back as a kid, I mean, I remember playing Boogerman with my cousin and my friends back in the day, and one of the things that really kind of stood out for us was just the really great visuals in the game. The sprite work was so well done, and they were just so detailed and vibrant. But then also the really gross, kind of over the top humor that was involved in the game and stuff. But going back to the original game, how did you guys come up with a concept? And then also, what was the pitch like when you guys pitched that to Interplay back then? I'd be interested in kind of hearing what some of the reception was like initially before you guys even really started on the meat and potatoes of the game.
What's pretty funny is that Mike's the one that promoted me out of test at Interplay. He was a programmer. I was in test. I wanted to get into doing design. And he had just finished working on RoboCop versus Terminator, which I did a little bit of work on. And so Mike promoted me out, and Interplay knew that they had a in-house Sega game coming up that they wanted to do, and so that was Mike's project. And at the very beginning, it was pitched to us by Brian Fargo and of In Exile, and Alan Pavlish, who's also involved, one of the original Wasteland designers. It was pitched to us as them wanting to make a game that appealed to the Garbage Pail Kid fan base and generation. They weren't really sure what they wanted to do, but they knew they wanted to do something that was gross, and something that dealt with that kind of stuff. So I think when we started the game, it was actually called the Gross Out game. And the idea was to make, I think we were talking about a thing using the multi-tap on the Genesis, where you kind of did different stuff in the world to gross out the other characters and make the other characters puke or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so it started with that. It always had that gross aspect attached to it. And I can't remember exactly who it was that came up with the idea of the original character, but I believe the original character that somebody mentioned was Captain Flatulence. And it might have been Brian or it might have been Mike. I can't, I'm not really sure who it's so hard to remember exactly what it was. But, as soon as somebody said those words, Captain Flatulence, it immediately was like, holy crap, you guys, we got to make a superhero that's like this,
That's awesome.
And so it's, thinking back on it, it all seemed really natural, so to speak. It was a lot simpler back then, I think, in terms of pitching ideas and getting ideas signed off on. And, there wasn't a lot of politics involved. There wasn't massive teams. There weren't a lot of focus groups and stuff like that. So if it's something that Mike and I or Brian and Alan liked or thought was funny, then it was something that we wrote down and most likely went into the game. Once we came up with the name of Boogerman, the rest of the stuff kind of came pretty easily, and some of it's really goofy, and a lot of people say it's the most juvenile game ever created, and so I take that as a compliment, even though sometimes
Absolutely.
It's not meant as a compliment. But coming up with stuff like the nose goblins, that was probably pretty easy early on. Characters like Boogermeister was probably one of the first things that we came up with. So, at the time, it was super creative, and it was really fun. I think that's one of the things I remember most about making the game and designing the game was that it was just fun every day. Just the concepts were fun, the descriptions were fun, working with the animation team was really fun, coming up with what was going to be in the worlds, and it was a lot of laughing. During that first year for sure.
That's awesome, and I guarantee that's something that's not probably the case with most video games when you're making them, or a lot of games out there. So they're not always fun to create.
The stuff's become every single game I've done since then. Games are hard to make, and we always joke about this at studios. It's like making games is hard, and it's like it's pretty tough. And it doesn't get easier, as platforms have gotten more complex and everything's become more advanced, and the teams get larger and the money gets bigger, it just gets harder and harder. And so those moments of that kind of fun are still there, but they're a lot less common, than they used to be, for sure. And that's one of the main reasons Mike and I wanted to take a shot at doing this game was, we love making games. Don't get me wrong, I've loved every game and every process and team that I've worked on. But, there's just something about wanting to get back to something that's a little bit simpler, a little more straightforward, smaller budget, and something that, if we get the opportunity to build it, we'll be building it for, it'll be the fans of the game that allow us to build it in the first place. And it'll, hopefully if it does get funded, it'll be that kind of process again, where we can just have a really good time making it and get back to why we got into making games in the first place.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about earlier about a resurgence in retro gaming, and that's certainly been the case. I mean, we've seen it quite a lot this past couple of years. But What do you attribute that to? Why do you think there's been this kind of resurgence and all this nostalgic feeling within the game industry over the last couple of years?
I think some of it has to do with the new generation of gamers coming up. People's parents now are people that played these kind of games. Kids that are growing up now with parents that are my age, I've been involved in games all my life, playing or making them. Where it was a little bit different when I was growing up. My video games were kind of new for my folks and my parents and grandparents. So I think one thing that helps that is it's more commonplace now, and it's something that's been in people's lives for a long time. I think the other thing is, well, a couple of the other things are, one thing is, I think there's a little bit, I don't want to necessarily say that it's burnout, but I think there's just so much stimulation in terms of what current gaming has become and what the popular games are now, that people are looking for something different, and they see this stuff and it's different and it's fun, and some people can get over the graphic leap and some people can't, and the people that can, I think that it's probably pretty refreshing to see some of the stuff that was out back then. And to be honest with you, a lot of these games that are popping back up again, they're really great games. When you go back and play the Marios now, or the Mega Mans, or the Metroids, those games still hold up really well. And I think that's another true testament is what's fun back then, that's built on solid foundation and good design philosophies, is still proves to be fun today, because that's what a lot of the games today are built on themselves, value-wise.
Okay, interesting. So in your Kickstarter video, you and Mike talked about 5 years ago, you first started talking about doing a Boogerman remake. But I want to know, why was it just 5 years ago that you guys really started talking about that? I mean, Boogerman back then, from what I remember, was pretty well received, at least, in my circle of friends back then. So it's crazy to think that there wasn't real talk of that, or there wasn't any real discussion of sequels even back in the 16-bit era. So I'm just kind of interested in hearing, why just now, or why recently have you guys really, been given this thought?
Well, we had planned a sequel at Interplay, and we actually started on it concept-wise. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about adding into the 20th anniversary is actually stuff from the sequel. But Mike and we left Interplay, went to different companies. Eventually, I ended up at Virgin Interactive. He actually went back to Interplay, it's really weird. That time just kind of went past. It's like I got in at Crystal Dynamics, and I was really into the Gex stuff that we were doing at the time. And I worked on Gex for a number of years and Gex-related stuff, and so that felt pretty natural. And after that, I ended up at EA working on Lord of the Rings. And before I knew it, 6 years had gone by of working on Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
and
holy crap!
And Mike had become, I had moved up to San Francisco. Mike had stayed down in LA. Mike had a family. A new family coming along. I got really entrenched in Lord of the Rings and working up at EA, and it just took a while for everything to kind of line back up again. Once I got back down to LA and ended up at Activision, it was shortly after that when Mike and I kind of reconnected. And started talking about it again, and it was also about the same time probably that Interplay put out the Wii console version. And to be honest with you, I just we've always loved the game, but we probably didn't realize at the time that there was interest in it.
Okay.
And seeing that there has been interest in it, and people it's developed a bit of a cult following. That also makes us really happy, and we kind of look back at it and think, yeah, we made something that was pretty meaningful to some people. And, that's also pretty inspirational and wanting to go back to that as well.
Awesome. Did you guys, because I know back, in the early days and even in the 16-bit era, a lot of times the creators of games kept the IP rights and kept the ownership of the games that they created. And obviously now that's not the case in the video game industry. So I'm kind of interested in how you guys ended up with the rights of Boogerman. Is it still belong to Interplay? Does it belong to you guys, or how did that kind of work?
It does still belong to Interplay. Interplay's been through a lot of different changes over the years. Brian Fargo was the original founder. Mm-hmm. I don't know the exact roadmap of where everything went, but the company changed hands. Brian went off and started In Exile. Interplay became less of a developer. Not less of a developer. Basically they started making fewer games.
Right.
That's what I mean. And
sure.
So when we started talking about it, I think we probably talked to Brian first to find out, who had the rights still. And once we learned that Interplay did, it was just a process I went through of getting hold of the guys that were currently in charge of the license. And, I've been talking with those guys too, probably about 5 years or so. Okay. About the time Mike and I started talking is about the time that we approached Interplay about it. And so, it's been, a process of building up a relationship with these guys and touching base every year or so to see where we're at with stuff and to see where their head's at with stuff. And it was probably about 6 or so months ago where, I got back in touch with them and we started talking again and everybody agreed that if it was something we wanted to do, it feels like it might be a good time to look at it and to really consider doing it. And so that's kind of what put everything in motion, and obviously I was in the middle of stuff at Insomniac. So, that was obviously my first priority to make sure that the Insomniac stuff was as good as it could be and working on the games there. And it wasn't until after we shipped Fuse to where I could actually even think about, okay, maybe in the future here I might be able to go off and do this, But even then it was still a while before I was really in a position to where that was something that was feasible to do. But yeah, we're working with Interplay with this. They're officially the license holders, but they're fully supportive of us and they're backing us 100% with it. So it's pretty cool. That's great. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's awesome that they're they're willing to work with you guys on that. You said in your video that Boogerman 25th Anniversary isn't a remake, but it's more of a reimagining of the original game. But there's going to be a lot of the same characters. Boogerman, obviously, Boogermeister is going to make a return, and many of the same levels. So can you kind of talk about what the difference is between a remake and what your vision is for this reimagining of Boogerman?
Yeah, it's funny because at the time when we made the video, it sounded perfectly clear to me. But now when I watch the video back, it's a little bit confusing the way I say it's not an HD remake. What I really meant was that we're not taking the original game and rezzing up the graphics and porting it over to the new stuff. So, it was important to us and it was important to Interplay as well that if we were going to do another Boogerman, that we really took a look at what aspects of the game we really loved and what stuff we didn't love, and to make sure that we focused on that stuff. It's been 20 years, so Boogerman was my very first game. And when I look back at the original, as much as I love the original and it has a really, special place for me, that it was my first game. So, it's like, it's a fun game, but, there's so much stuff and so many things that we can do better that, we wanted to do at the time that we didn't have time to do. There's so much stuff that Mike and I have learned that we want to apply to the new one. And so really what we're doing is we're taking the concept and the characters and the world, and we're building another game. We're starting from scratch. but we're basing it on the stuff that we liked and the stuff that we think, was fun and funny to the original game, which is a lot of the characters, a lot of the locations, some of the base story, and we're building a brand new game from the ground up. So when I say it's a reimagining, it's kind of a reimagining. It's a reboot. It's kind of like how they reboot some of these movies that come out. It's like,
don't say Superman.
No, I won't say that. But it's like, we're not gonna do super crazy stuff to it and make them all modern and gritty and mature and that kind of thing. It's still based on all of the fun, basic core stuff that we loved about the original. But, we know that we can make a better game, and so the things that you're going to see that are going to be the same is you're going to see a lot of the same characters. You're obviously going to see the main characters stay the same. You'll see the same names for some of the worlds and the theme of the worlds. But, the stuff that you'll definitely see are 100% new levels, 100% new artwork for the levels, an entirely new game structure, obviously new game mechanics programmed from scratch to work with this stuff. And hopefully, if we get the opportunity to do it, it'll be a better game. It'll be a solid game. And, we didn't know a lot about certain things back then. We didn't really understand a lot about ramping or level progression or character progression or, even as something as cliche as player compulsions, there were games that were touching on that stuff like Mario and Metroid, but the industry for us was so young at the time that we just wanted to make games, so we just made the game the way we thought at the time was the right way to make it. And, I think for what it is, it's a fun game, and it's got a lot of character and a lot of charm to it. But, it's pretty exciting now with the hardware and the new consoles. I mean, when we used to think about the game and do concept art for it back in the day, it looked more like what we're showing now for the campaign. But because of the limitations of the 16-bit stuff, it obviously didn't look like that, at the time. And our time was pretty short back then too. We were working on a fairly new engine, building it on the Genesis, which programming-wise was all assembly-based. And stuff took longer back then, and now we're using Unity, and we're using a lot more powerful machines. And so we have more freedom and more room to make, a lot more interesting visuals and hopefully we have the skills now to also bring it up to current standards in terms of, platform games. I mean, we love platform games. I love Rayman Legends. I love Origins. So we're really inspired by that kind of stuff. And, so we're just hoping that we can bring it up to current standard. But, really the main thing I wanted to get across was that we weren't taking the same exact game and just up-resing the textures and sprites and porting it over.
Right. Yeah, I have to say, though, the few screenshots or the concept art that you guys posted up with along with your Kickstarter looks absolutely fantastic. And it does. I mean, it really... When I first saw it, I was like, man, it kind of reminds me of the visual style of Rayman. Just how well drawn out and vibrant all the art and colors are. It just really pops out. And, if you guys can come close to even recreating, that in the actual game, I have to say it's going to be very impressive.
I think that we will be able to, and over the next couple of weeks, we're putting together some tech demos that we'll be updating to the campaign that hopefully will show a progression from the concept art into an in-engine setup where you can see what the world might look like when it's moving. Hopefully we get a character in there and start to get an idea of what that's going to look like. We got really lucky too this time. We're working with a young artist from up north named Nino Navarra. And he's a great artist, and he gets the whole idea. So I mean, the very first sketch he sent me was of the sewer stuff, that sewer concept art, and it was based off of a paragraph description that I gave him.
Wow!
And when I got it back, I was just like, "Oh, dude, this is right on," So we
That's
got
awesome.
lucky, we got lucky to work with someone like that, and he's able to deliver the visuals of exactly what we're thinking and talking about. So that goes a long way.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you kind of touched on some of the other people on your team, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the others. I've already heard some excitement from people on Twitter and elsewhere about that Grant Kirkhope and Jordana Arkin have joined the team. So can you kind of talk about how that involvement came to be, and how they ultimately ended up joining the team, and what you guys feel that they're actually going to bring to the game?
Yeah, sure. Jordana is actually a good friend of mine. We worked together at Activision. She was writing on the Kung Fu Panda game when I
Hmm.
was working on that at Luxaflux. So, she's someone that once I left Luxaflux and once she was done writing, we've stayed in touch and kind of followed what each other are working on over, throughout that time. And she's a great writer, and she's got a great sense of humor, and she just kind of gets that style of humor and that style of writing. And she right now is working at Disney Television Animation. She's heading up a new show called Star in the Forces of Evil, which she's co-creator and head writer of. But Disney was very nice about letting Jordana participate in this, which is awesome. We feel pretty lucky about that. And I just think she'll just I'm not a writer. Mike's not a writer, and back when we made the original, it wasn't that important. Um,
Hmm.
but now, it's become a big aspect of games in general. So, hopefully she will be able to bring life to the characters, and we're going to build story moments into the game this time, and actually have some simple cutscenes and flesh out the story a bit more. So we needed somebody on, and she was my first choice. I've called her, met her for lunch, and she was on board right away. So we're pretty excited about that. Now for Grant, uh, I'm now friends with Grant. It's a fairly new friendship. I've been a fan of Grant's for, since the very first Banjo-Kazooie. I mean, the very first time I ever heard that theme song, I was just like,
Absolutely.
what is that? Who wrote that?
Right
Uh,
on.
and, once we started really talking seriously about Boogerman this time, I just reached out to Grant and introduced myself, told him who I was. I wasn't sure where he was. I wasn't sure if he was in the UK or in the States, or it turned out he was right down the street,
Wow.
which was pretty awesome. So we met at the Cheesecake Factory, and and we had lunch, and we hit it off right off the bat. Grant and I are from we're both from the same generation of games. We both share a love for classic games. We both love Iron Maiden, which
Awesome.
which is awesome. And I'm just it's funny when I'm around Grant. I'm a total fanboy, right? Because I'm just like, tell
Yeah.
me about when you wrote this one, Grant. Tell me about that one. Did you write the rap in Donkey Kong 64? So I just kind of fanboyed out on him a little bit. It was a little
That's
embarrassing
hilarious.
the first time I met him. But Grant's an awesome guy, and he's a super talented composer. And again, with him, from the time, within the first hour of meeting, he was like, absolutely, I'm on board. Just let me know what you need, and let's make this happen. So we were fortunate that he was able to create the title theme concept that we have up on the Kickstarter campaign. And again, with Grant, it's like working with Jordana or working with Nino. We talk about it, we get it, I describe it to him, I go away, he sends me something, and I'm like, yep, that's it. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That's pretty much right on. So it's just another one of those situations where we got really lucky, and he's just an awesome guy. So I'm really, really super excited about having both those guys, and having Grant do the music for me is just like, again, I'm such a Rare fan. Rare's one of my favorite all-time companies. I mean,
Right.
from back when they were Ultimate Play the Game on the Spectrum and Battletoad stuff, and I
Hmm.
remember the first CES where I saw the first Donkey Kong Country. Um, and everybody, including myself, we were working on Genesis and Super Nintendo stuff at the time also. And it was like, what the hell are they running that on? There's some
Yeah.
Silicon Graphics machine under the table, and it's like people
I know.
under the table. And when you look at it now, you can see how they did it. But at the time, it was stuff something you had never seen before.
I know.
That style of graphics and that concept of render out really awesome 3D models from an SGI and convert them down to sprites. They were just thinking on a different level. So they've always kind of blown my mind with everything that they've done. It's I've always kind of felt that way. So yeah, I'm gushing again over Grant.
No, that's awesome. No, I remember back when I first saw Donkey Kong Country, and I like you, I was completely blown away. I mean, it was a huge leap from a visual standpoint from what anyone had seen before. Like, you've never seen anything like that, and it was like, holy crap, like, what the hell are they doing over there, working with some black magic over at Rare. So one of the things I want to talk about, because you did touch on a little bit about the story of the original game and how you didn't really have much of it, but I do love how preposterous the idea of is a multimillionaire dressing up as a janitor to fight crime. That's just hilarious. But aside from Boogermeister, who you guys have said is going to make a return, I'm interested in some of the other sub bosses, because I did enjoy those, like like Flyboy, Deodorant, and are they going to make a return in the game? Because you haven't really touched on that. You said there are going to be some other sub bosses, but what's the deal with those guys?
Yeah, we're definitely going to bring those characters back for sure. It's Boogermeister, in the original story, it was Boogermeister who took the crystal that allowed Professor Stinkbomb to transexist the pollution and all the waste to this other dimension. But we never really talked about what Boogermeister was going to do with the crystal once he had it. And we never really talked about, well, if he got the crystal, then he was able to get to this dimension somehow. And at the very end of Boogerman, even after we replace the crystal, there's still a nose goblin that pops up out of the portal at the very end and spits at Boogerman when he runs off screen. So I think we're going to try and flesh that stuff out a bit and try and explain what Dimension Excrement is, and where Boogermeister comes from, and why he exists and what he's actually after. But the bosses are definitely going to make a return. The funny thing about the bosses is, with the exception of Revolta, every single one of those bosses were original concepts for Boogerman.
Oh, wow.
So when we were working with the animation house, going through the process of creating the main character, they would just do a ton of sketches. There were several people working on it, and we didn't really know what we wanted, so they would make all these different ideas, and we would pull these aside and say, well, this is a funny character, but we don't really think this guy fits very well, and this guy's probably too tall, and this guy's legs are too long. And at some point, Mike and I both kind of looked at each other and were like, I think these are our bosses, because they were built around the same concept of being a gross character,
right,
and being something that could exist in that world. And so once we decided that we were going to go ahead and do that, we went through and we named them. And a lot of people joke with us about, oh, it's Flyboy, it's Hick Boy, it's whatever. I've seen this funny graphic on the internet that's a napkin that's like, this is a piece from the video game museum, and it's got all this stuff on about Boogerman. It's like, Flyboy, check. Hick Boy, check. And it's like, and it's all these things making fun of how simple that stuff is, or just kind of how cliche they are. But then you've got Deodorant, and it's got that written down. It's like, ha ha, exclamation point, Deodorant. But we're definitely going to bring those characters back. We have some different ideas of how they're going to come back, and we're going to build in, right back into the story. We have ideas of who they were, and there's some stuff in the original manuals about where they came from and what their backgrounds were. Like Deodorant was a character named Warren Laris, who was a computer programmer who was like, a bug fixer. You know, he was like a
Right.
bug smasher, right? So,
Okay.
and he was really stinky and always nasally, and so that's why he carried deodorant and antacid and, you know, antihistamine with him, which is Boogerman's kryptonite, obviously. So, you know, so we're going to build, you know, go ahead, we're going to write into the story more of their history and make sure that they're more involved in terms of what's their relationship to Boogermeister, because they all make kind of they're all kind of the bumbling, you know, the bumbling, you know, henchmen of the main character, or of the main boss. So, but yeah, those guys are definitely going to return, and we had some ideas for the sequel that we're going to be using for this one as well, for how some of those guys appear.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So one of the things that really stuck out for me when I first saw the Kickstarter was the platforms that you guys are going to be releasing on. Most notably that stuck out was you guys are going to be releasing on PS4. You're also going to be on the Vita and the Wii U, in addition to the PC and Mac. How did you come to decide on what console platforms you were going to actually develop and release on?
You know, this was something that we went back and forth on a lot, and I think when we first started with the campaign or talking about the campaign, it was like, okay, we know we're going to do PC,
right?
Because that's going to be the core development system that we start with.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to do Mac because I have a Mac. You know? And nowadays it's not too far off from the PC version.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we sat on that for a little bit, it became pretty apparent to me that I wanted to make sure that people knew that what we were making was a console game. You know, I mean, This is a console game at the end of the day. It'll be on the Mac and it'll be on the PC, but it's coming from guys, Mike and myself and the other folks involved, that have been primarily or 99% console developers their entire careers. You know, so it was important to me that once we had the Kickstarter up, that people saw that we were starting on console on day one. It wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't something that we were going to port over later. You know, we want people to understand that we come from that background, and that's our mentality, you know, when we approach a game like this. So it was really important at the beginning that we had some console presence. What consoles they were going to be on has been up in the air, you know, pretty much until the last couple of weeks. You know, we started by saying, okay, we'll do 360 and PS3, and we'll look at doing Wii U. And then we switched over to, okay, let's not do PS3 and 360. Let's look at doing PS4 and Xbox One. You know, and the reality is we'd love to do it on every single console that's out.
Sure.
It's just with every single console, there's licensing fees, you know, there's Unity costs. So at some point, you kind of have to start narrowing it down to what stuff can we have, you know, is going to fit in this price range. You know, we could say, yeah, it's $1 million goal, and we're doing it on everything, but it's just not realistic in terms of funding. You know, we were concerned at first that we wanted to hit PS3 and 360 because they've got the largest install bases. But then we also take into account that, you know, if we do the game, it's going to be coming out, you know, almost a year after the new consoles are out.
That's a good point.
There's been some worry of, you know, are people going to be willing to commit to a game on Kickstarter that they don't even own the console for yet? Because a lot of people aren't going to get on board with the new stuff right off the bat, you know, but they may think, well, down the road or next year or during the first price drop, I'll pick up an Xbox One or a PS4. You know, so we've had to make some pretty tough calls with that kind of stuff, you know, and at the very end of the day, it felt like, you know, doing it on the newest stuff was going to be the right thing for us to do. You know, sure, we'd love to sell, you know, 50 million copies, but, you know, what we really want to do is we want to be able to work with good companies and work on, you know, great hardware on a platform that is getting the support that it needs. And we felt that if we went with the 360 and PS3, that, you know, we might be losing out a little bit on some of the newer aspects of the the new consoles coming out. You know, Wii U for me was kind of a no-brainer. I'm a Nintendo guy. You know, I always have been a huge fan of Nintendo. So, you know, at that point, it just came down to contacting the companies and finding out, okay, you know, are you guys interested in us working on your hardware? This is what we want to do. So Nintendo, you know, they came through really quickly. They, you know, that was the first one that we knew for sure we were going to be able to do. Sony one was second. They've been incredibly supportive. I have a lot of great friends over at Sony also. And, you know, they were on board from the first moment that we started talking to them about it. I really wanted to support the Vita because I'm a big fan of that hardware. You know,
Awesome. I love the Vita.
I want a game like this on the Vita, you know?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, for selfish reasons, I want to do it on the Vita also.
That's awesome.
You know, we would love to develop it on Xbox One as well. You know, the thing right now with Microsoft is they're slammed with getting the Xbox One launch stuff going. And Sony's the same way. So, you know, Xbox One is definitely not ruled out. It just wasn't something that we could officially commit to at the time of the campaign launch. You know, I definitely got some emails today of like, if you're not supporting Xbox One, you know, you're not getting my money. And, you know, I reply back to the people of like, look, we want to do everything. You know?
Right, yeah.
And if it gets funded, I hope that we are able to do an Xbox One version. But like I said, it's just we're not able to officially say at this point that we're going to do one. And the last thing we want to do is come out and say we're going to do all this stuff and then have something like that fall through and not be able to deliver for people.
Oh,
you know?
obviously, yeah.
So you know, it was a tough call on which stuff to do. But you know, so far, you know, I've definitely got the emails today about Unity, supporting Unity, especially with the new Steam OS coming out. So we're looking at Unity now to see, you know, how big of a leap that's going to be. It probably won't be too bad, so I'm hopeful that we can support Unity as well. We got some questions today regarding the crossplay with the Vita and the PS4.
That's like my next question. So,
so that's something that we're talking with Sony about. You know, they'd love for us to support it. We just haven't gone into details yet about exactly what that entails, but it's
early on still. I imagine, you know,
it is, but
it's
something that we're really hopeful for. So I won't be surprised to see that happening either. You know, so hopefully that will be the case. You know, so, one of the backers today emailed me and he said, I want both versions. Should I pledge 2 different times for both versions right now? And I said, as much as I'd love for you to pledge 2 times, don't do it yet. Let's see what's going to happen with that, because you know, hopefully that's something we can support. And if you buy the PS4 version, then if we do end up supporting that, you will get the Vita version as well. So
awesome. Are there going to be any possible Wii U specific features for it? Because the gamepad does, you know, allow for some neat, you know, features and stuff. So has there been any talk between you and Mike on like what you guys could possibly do with that?
You know, we've talked a little bit about it. You know, I mean, on the one hand, we're big fans of same couch co-op. You know, I mean, I love stuff like Rayman's done with the touchpad, stuff like Mario Galaxy that they did with the second player support. Even Mario U has some really cool stuff with that. But we don't know for sure yet. You know, the biggest thing for me is I'm one of those guys that really believe strongly in, if we can't come up with a good enough reason for it, then we're not going to support it.
Right.
We're not going to put it in there as something just to put on the back of the box or to put as a bullet point. But it's something that we're definitely going to be talking about and see what we can come up with. You know, the other thing I like about the Wii U sometimes when games don't have the touchpad support is I like being able to play the game on just the pad.
Right, yeah.
You know, so there's that side of me too that's like, well, I kind of love the idea of just taking the controller off to bed and I can just play the game just normal on that. So it's still up in the air, but it's definitely something we're looking at for sure.
I have an idea.
Okay.
What about a Navi type character from Zelda, but it's a flying Booger Fairy that a second character or second player can control and actually interact with Boogerman.
I love it. I think it's cool. I think it's awesome. I mean, I love the idea of a character like that could even interact with with enemies and stuff on the screen. I think Mario U has some stuff like that where they have the one character that's, or maybe it's in Luigi, the one character that's invincible. You can never die, but you also can't do a lot of the stuff that Mario can do, but you can do things like stun enemies or put them in different states and that sort of thing. So, that's definitely something that would be worth looking at too.
Awesome. I think that's about all the questions I had, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to, to say anything that we may not have touched on, or talk to the actual potential Kickstarter backers out there, and tell them why they should actually back Boogerman 20th anniversary.
Well, let's see. I don't want to sound too corny here, but I mean, if we're able to make this game, it's going to be because of the backers and because of the fans that support the game. And we take that very seriously. It's something that's really important to us. And we fully understand that we're not going to make it if we don't get the full support and full backing from people who want the game. And so, we're 100% dedicated at this point. I've left my job at Insomniac. Mike is 100% with me on this stuff. And it's all we're doing, and it's all we're working on. Some people today asked, why isn't there gameplay yet? And the only thing I can tell them is because I just left Insomniac a month ago, and it's taken about a month to get the campaign together. We wanted to make sure that we could get the campaign out in time to where if it does get funded, we have enough time to make it for the 20th anniversary, which is November of next year. So for people who are seeing it and are concerned about there not being gameplay yet, it's something that we're definitely working on. We'll have some updates that show some stuff throughout the campaign. But the reason isn't because we're not capable of doing it. It's because we're trying to get this stuff and get our ducks in a row and make sure that we have the time that we need to develop it. Mike and I have made a lot of games together, not together, we've made a few games together, but Mike and I have made a lot of games over the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. So we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to deliver on what we're saying. And hopefully we'll be able to show some updates with that stuff. But back to the funding stuff, the support that we get from everybody and the emails we get and the tweets that we get and stuff, it's really meaningful, and we're incredibly flattered, and we're very humbled, and we want to return the support to you guys and to the people that are backing it, and make something that people will have fun to play. The reason we're making this game is because we want to get back to just making something that at the core is just built around being fun. Games are so serious now, and stuff is so violent, and things are so over the top that it's something that we think people will enjoy, and I know that we'll enjoy making it. So, just help spread the word. That's the most important thing. The biggest thing that helps these Kickstarters make it is people spreading the word. It's getting the word out to people, letting people know that, hey, this game's in development, or this Kickstarter's going up. Whether somebody pledges $1 or $10,000, it's all equally as meaningful, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this.
Awesome. Well, I can't say thank you enough for coming onto the show, and we wish you guys all the best, and we'll continue covering Boogerman as it continues through its campaign. But I hope about a month from now we'll all be kind of celebrating with you guys that this game's going to be created.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. And somebody emailed me today and said, what happens if the game doesn't get funded? And I emailed him back and I said, look, I can't even think about that at this point. We got to think positive, and we got to try and get the word out. And, but if for some reason the game doesn't get funded, then it doesn't get funded. But the important thing is that we tried, and that we're trying over the next 34 days to make this happen. And the other important thing is how much we've all loved the game and how much fun we've had with it, you know, throughout the years of making it and playing it and everything else. So, you know, just positive thoughts and happy thoughts, and
Absolutely.
hopefully it'll happen for us.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining us again, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. Thanks, Chris.